Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So let's talk about ADHD. There's also ADD. Basically, it's attention deficit disorder, and then you have the hyperactivity disorder. Men are diagnosed with it more often. Overdiagnosed, I should say. Women are underdiagnosed with it. Women get it. It was, for a long time, people thought that ADD or ADHD was really just a man's disorder, brain disorder, and it is a legitimate brain disorder. Just to assume that you might have ADHD because you suffer from one or two of the symptoms doesn't really mean you have it. I think from what I remember being tested for it, you have to fall under at least 6 different symptoms in order for them to say, okay, you got it. People will tell you that it's for life, that you will suffer from it for life, and that you can only manage it as you get older. Managing it for a lot of people just means taking pills, taking drugs. And there's a couple different drugs that they give you. I don't remember what they both are, but it's basically a mild form of amphetamine. And I don't really know exactly, I can't explain biologically of why giving somebody some speed will calm them down. But that's what they've been giving people for a long time. They used to give people Dexedrine and, whatever, different forms of amphetamine speeds. I've never taken any of the pills, medication. I was diagnosed with it when I was, probably 10 years old, along with having dyslexia and other learning disabilities. A lot of the symptoms of ADHD or ADD are, how to explain it? It's kind of like being scatterbrained. You have a hard time taking directions or following directions. Have a hard time remembering directions. Have a hard time remembering the steps in a process. Have a hard time paying attention, basically. You can have a hard time formulating clear thoughts. You can have a hard time communicating because you can't really formulate those thoughts very well. Your mind is always racing to different topics. It can be hard to stay on track with what you're talking about. You can be very forgetful of just what point you're even trying to make. Be right in the middle of a sentence and completely forget what you're talking about. I've done this with my mother. My mother and I think we both had it because we could be in the middle of a conversation about something and she'll pause, and the pause will be extended all of a sudden, and she'll ask me, what were we talking about? Do you remember what subject we were on? And then I'll go blank and I'll be like, no. And it's not like I wasn't listening, it's just we both have this massive brain fart. There's a lot of different symptoms of attention deficit disorder, and you could look it up and see all the 16 or whatever it is, different symptoms that they list. I think I suffered from most of them. Some of the symptoms can be a little bit unrelated to school, but can get you in trouble in school. So you might have a hard time keeping your mouth shut. You may be too talkative. You might have a hard time obeying rules. People with attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can often become troublemakers. It can lead to addiction. It can lead to all kinds of activity. But getting off of just what the definition is, I think a lot of people really already know it, Especially if you have it, you know what it is. And that's who this video is for people who have it. If you've been diagnosed with ADHD and you've been taking the pills, but you still feel like you suffer from it, well, one of the problems with the pills is if you don't have them, if you run out, then your problem just comes creeping right back, and that can cause a whole different world of anxiety. ADHD already causes anxiety and depression. You can all of a sudden slip into it even faster. I like to learn how to manage the disorders that I have. It means that I've had to work a little bit harder than other people because I don't have the help of the drugs. But when you learn how to manage something like this, you do a lot better than just pacifying it with the drug, because you don't have to worry about running out. All you have to worry about are the tips and the tricks that work for you. What's worked for me, and I discovered this late in life. I had suffered from all the symptoms of ADHD for most of my life, all through adulthood. But the main problem for me, I guess, as I got older, was how scatterbrained I felt. I just had a hard time formulating thoughts in a linear fashion. Had a hard time shutting down all the various mind chatter and thoughts that were going on all at once. What seemed easier for other people felt harder for me. I've always just kind of been antsy. I have a hard time sitting in one place for too long. I don't like movie theaters for that reason. 3 hours in that room, in those chairs. I don't care if they have big luxury chairs now. I have a hard time doing that. That's a hard date for me to do. If we go to a movie and dinner, I could sit through dinner, that's no big deal, but the movie, I'm getting up a few times and getting out of the movie theater. I might just go stand in the hallway. I just don't like being in there. I get sick of sitting in one place for too long. I've had a hard time following directions, remembering directions. So what's worked for me was learning how to write. Being a writer, I write books. The process of writing has been a phenomenal help with my ADHD, and I believe at this point that I really feel like it's cured it. Although they tell you, psychiatrists will tell you, you don't ever lose it, you'll have it forever. I don't know. I feel like I've worked through it, like I've grown out of it. I'm almost 50. I finally grew out of it in my 40s. Suffered from it for my whole life. And in my 40s, I finally have grown out of it. The process of writing for me is like this. I'll write my first draft for a story, and I just get it out there. I don't stop. I'm just like a snowball going down a hill. I just want to get that story out. All the main points, everything, get it out. If I make a mistake, if it's weird, if it's jumbled, doesn't matter. I just steamroll right through that shit. Get it out. The first draft may be a direct representation of how I think. I realized that when I go back to read my first draft, because when you write, you have to do a couple drafts. Get used to doing a few drafts, at least 3. But this is part of the process, the practice of getting over ADHD. You can start writing. If you don't write already, you should start writing. There's a lot of benefits. I could go on and on about why people should write, but you could do it just because you want to get through your ADHD. I found that after my first draft, when I would go through it again, because you want to read through what you wrote, now you have your story and you want to start going and editing it. The second draft is to fix the mistakes, not just the spelling, but to make sure your sentence structure is good. You want to do copy editing, but you want to fix the structure of the story, make sure it's moving fast enough, make sure there's no unnecessary information in there, make sure that it's a tight story from beginning to end. So that's what the second draft is. I realized that when I would read over my first draft, there was much of it that just felt incoherent. This is how my mind thinks. It comes out so perfect. When I'm writing it, I'm typing it, it feels to me like it's coming out perfect. I'll sit there and pat myself on the back after I finish my first draft and be like, God damn, that's fucking great. But then when I go back the next day or take a day off and 2 days off and then go back and look at it, I realize, whoa, this is all over the place. I go through it line by line, word for word, and try to fix it and have it make sense. I go through each paragraph meticulously, and I never go on to the next paragraph until I feel positive about that last one. what I do is I first go over each paragraph in my head. I'll read it silently in my head and fix each sentence so it makes sense. And then I will read it aloud. I'll read that paragraph aloud. When I go to read the paragraph aloud, I'm intending to be able to read those several sentences without stopping, to read it perfectly, and to understand what is going on in that paragraph. So by the time I've gotten to that end of that paragraph, I'm formulating pictures in my head. This story is starting to come together. This scene, because you write scene by scene when you write chapters, this scene is coming together. And I make sure that as I'm doing that, I fix any kind of story structure issue. I'm taking out unnecessary information, redundancies, and it'll be full of that shit, chock full of it. I've found that I can very often write the same sentence twice, but in two different ways. I'll be like, well, I just basically said the same thing 2 times in a row. Let me take one of those fucking sentences out. You don't need it. Get rid of everything you don't need. And the idea is when you go back and read aloud that paragraph that you've worked on, you want to read it through perfectly, as if you're reading to a crowd with no stumbles. If you stumble at all, you have to fix that. You want it to read perfectly. You don't want your sentences to be too long, no run-on sentences. You want to fix all that shit and read it perfectly. And then you move on to the next. And you do that all the way through your story. This process of writing and rewriting and editing and reading aloud helps to reprogram your brain. You start to think differently. You start to do this process when you're thinking, but you can do it obviously much quicker. You'll find that you become less scatterbrained, that you have a greater memory recall. Even your reading, it's important to be reading. With ADHD, reading is hard. I could read a paragraph and fall asleep. I could read a page and not even remember a single thing that's on that page. Don't remember any of it. I have no idea what I just read. Somebody could ask me, so what did you just read? You read one page. What was on that page? I don't even know. No idea. Not even any, like I was fucking, my mind was erased. Now, with this process of writing and editing and reading aloud, and then making sure that, your story is tight, with this process that I've gone through of writing, my reading has become a lot better. I read every single morning. I can read a whole book and remember the stuff. All of a sudden, reading is fun. It used to be so difficult. Now it's fun. Now I enjoy it. I can think better. I can communicate better when I'm talking to people. I can formulate thoughts more naturally in more of a linear fashion. People take me more seriously. And I always wondered, why don't people take me more seriously? People treat me like I'm a goddamn joke. I know stuff and people act like I'm stupid. But it was because, just like in those first drafts, the shit would come out all weird. It may sound good in my head when I'm thinking it or as I'm saying it, but other people would just sit there and listen and be like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? All those wrinkles get smoothed out through the writing process. So I'm going to use the word cure. I know psychiatrists don't like to use the word cure. They would like me to just say management. But I think writing is the cure for ADHD. That's the process that I've gone through. It's helped me tremendously. And I suggest every single person out there with ADHD, give it a try. Thanks for watching.